For 15 years, I had dreamed of having my own swimming pool. Not one of those public pools with screaming children and the overwhelming smell of chlorine, but my own private sanctuary where I could float peacefully after a long day at work. When I finally purchased my home in Sycamore Hills 3 years ago, the spacious backyard was the main selling point. It was the perfect canvas for my vision. I spent the first 2 years renovating the inside of the house, making it exactly what I wanted. Then finally, last spring, I broke ground on my dream pool project. I hired a reputable contractor who specialized in custom backyard retreats. We designed an elegant kidney-shaped pool with a small waterfall feature cascading over natural stone. The deck was premium travertine that stayed cool even under the hot summer sun. Lush landscaping created privacy screens on both sides. The entire project cost nearly my entire savings, but when it was finished, it was everything I had hoped for. Sycamore Hills was a pleasant neighborhood with well-maintained homes and manicured lawns. What was less pleasant was our homeowners association, or more specifically, its president, Diane Morello. Everyone called her Karen behind her back, and for good reason. She seemed to live for sending violation notices for grass that was a quarter-inch too tall or garbage cans left at the curb 20 minutes past the permitted time. My first encounter with Karen happened during my pool construction. She appeared at my fence line, clipboard in hand, watching the workers pour concrete for the pool deck. I noticed her taking pictures with her phone. When I approached to introduce myself, her smile did not reach her eyes. "I hope you have all the proper permits and HOA approvals for this construction," she said, her pen hovering over her clipboard. "Pools are a significant liability issue for the neighborhood." I assured her that everything was properly permitted and approved. I had spent weeks getting all the necessary paperwork in order. She nodded, but the look in her eyes told me she was disappointed not to have found a violation. The pool was completed in early June, and I spent every evening enjoying my own private paradise. The tension in my shoulders from my high-stress accounting job melted away as I floated in the crystal-clear water, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. It was everything I had worked so hard to achieve. To celebrate the completion, I invited my family over for a small gathering. My parents, my sister with her husband and their 2 children, and my brother. 8 people total. We grilled burgers and the kids played in the pool under careful supervision. It was a perfect afternoon until the sound of a throat clearing caught my attention. Corinne stood at my side gate, which I had left unlocked for my family to enter. She was dressed in a crisp white blouse and khaki pants despite the summer heat, not a hair out of place in her perfectly styled blonde bob. "I do not recall seeing an event request form for a pool party," she said, looking pointedly at my family enjoying themselves. "The HOA requires notification for gatherings of more than 6 people that might impact common areas or neighbor enjoyment." My brother, who has never been one to hold his tongue, called out from the pool, "This is a family cookout, not a rave, and it is happening in a private backyard." Karen pursed her lips and made a note on her clipboard. "I am just doing my job enforcing the community standards we all agreed to when purchasing homes here. I will let it slide this time, but do remember the rules in the future." As she turned to leave, she paused, looking back at the pool with an expression I could not quite place. It was almost calculating. "It really is a lovely pool," she said. "The neighborhood has been wanting a community pool for years, but the budget never allowed for it." I thought nothing of the comment at the time. I was just relieved she was leaving us to enjoy our afternoon. I did not realize then that Corinne had already set her sights on my pool, and that her wheels were turning with plans that would soon disrupt my peaceful suburban life. The first hint that something was wrong came about 2 weeks after my family gathering. I was weeding my front garden when my neighbor Frank stopped by while walking his dog. "Hey there, I heard the community pool is open on weekends now. Is that right?" he asked casually. I straightened up, wiping dirt from my hands. "Community pool? I do not know anything about a community pool." Frank looked confused. "Oh, I thought. Karen mentioned at the coffee meetup that your new pool had some kind of shared access arrangement with the HOA. Something about the permit requiring community use options." My stomach tightened. "Frank, that is absolutely not true. My pool is private. I paid for it entirely myself, and there is no shared access arrangement of any kind." Frank seemed embarrassed. "Sorry about that. Must have been a misunderstanding." I brushed it off, but the conversation left me uneasy. 3 days later, I arrived home from work to find a woman I had never met standing at my front door with 2 children in swim attire. She looked annoyed. "We have been waiting for 15 minutes, she said by way of greeting. "The schedule said the pool opens at 4 on Tuesdays." I stared at her in disbelief. "I am sorry, but there is no schedule. This is my private residence and my private pool." The woman pulled out her phone and showed me a post in the neighborhood social media group. There, in black and white, was a post from Karen as HOA president announcing neighborhood pool hours at my address. Tuesdays and Thursdays from 4-7 p.m. and Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. My hands shook as I read the post. "This is completely unauthorized," I told the woman. "I never agreed to this. I am sorry you were misled, but this is not a community pool." The woman gathered her disappointed children and left, muttering something about selfish neighbors under her breath. I immediately called Karen, my anger building with every ring of the phone. "Diane Morello speaking," she answered primly. "Karen, this is your neighbor from 487 Sycamore Lane. I just had people show up at my door expecting to use my pool. They showed me your post about community pool hours. What is going on?" There was a pause before she answered. "Oh yes, about that. When you applied for your pool permit, you must have missed the community access provision. All new water features in the neighborhood have a community benefit requirement. It is in Section 7.3 of the covenant." "That is not true," I said firmly. "I read every word of those documents. There is no such provision." "Well, I have the documents right here in front of me," she replied, though I could hear the lie in her voice. "The board voted and approved the community use schedule last week. It is only 6 hours a week, which is quite reasonable considering the tax benefits you receive for the installation." Before I could respond, she continued, "There is an HOA meeting tomorrow evening. Feel free to bring your concerns there, though I must warn you that attempting to restrict community access to approved amenities is a violation subject to fines." The call ended with me staring at my phone in disbelief. That night, 3 different groups of children came to my door asking about swimming. I had to repeatedly explain that despite what they had been told, this was not a public pool. The following evening, I arrived at the HOA meeting with my pool permit documentation and property records in hand. Karen was already at the front of the room, a PowerPoint presentation displayed on the wall. To my horror, one of the slides showed my pool with the heading "New Community Amenity" and listed the unauthorized schedule for neighborhood use. The morning after the HOA meeting, I printed copies of my property deed, pool permit, and homeowner's insurance policy, which clearly showed the pool as a private residential feature. I highlighted the relevant sections and placed everything in a folder. My plan was to approach this rationally, with evidence in hand. I knocked on Corinne's door at a reasonable hour, Saturday morning around 10. She answered wearing gardening gloves, her perfectly manicured yard visible behind her. Her smile faltered when she saw me. "I would like to discuss the pool situation," I said, keeping my voice calm and professional. "I have brought documentation that clearly shows my pool is a private structure with no community access provisions." Corinne reluctantly invited me into her immaculate living room, where family photos in matching frames lined the mantel. Each one showed her picture-perfect family with identical forced smiles. She sat rigidly on the edge of her sofa as I spread the documents on her coffee table. "Here is my original deed with property boundaries. Here is the pool permit issued by the county with no mention of any community access requirement. And most importantly, here is my homeowner's insurance policy, which only covers private residential use. Any public use would invalidate my coverage and create a massive liability issue." Corinne barely glanced at the documents. "Those are outdated. The HOA board approved the Community Access Amendment last month." "May I see this amendment?" I asked. "It is being finalized by our attorneys," she said smoothly. "But it has been approved and is binding on all water features in the community." "Corinne, you cannot simply declare my private property to be community property. That is not how this works." She stood up, signaling the end of our discussion. "I understand you are upset about sharing. Many people struggle with that concept, but the needs of the community must sometimes come before individual preferences. The decision has been made and the schedule will remain in place." Realizing this direct approach had failed, I drafted a formal letter to the entire HOA board requesting correction of the misinformation being spread about my pool. I documented the false claims, included copies of my paperwork, and requested a written retraction of the community pool announcement within 7 days. I sent the letter by certified mail to each board member. By the following weekend, I had received no response, but what I did receive was a bright orange violation notice on my door. The citation was for unauthorized restriction of community amenities, with a fine of $100 per day until access was restored. I began seeing neighbors I had previously been friendly with giving me cold stares at the mailbox. One former friend from down the street stopped speaking to me entirely. When I ran into her at the grocery store, she loudly told her husband that some people move into nice neighborhoods and then refuse to be part of the community. I attempted to contact the HOA management company that oversees our community, leaving 3 voicemails that were never returned. When I sent an email requesting contact information for the HOA attorney, I received an automated response that my message had been flagged for review by the board president. It became clear that Corinne had effectively isolated me, controlling all channels of communication and spreading her narrative unchallenged. She had created an environment where I was seen as the problem, the selfish neighbor denying children access to a pool during the hot summer months. To make matters worse, families continued to arrive at my home during the posted pool hours, often expressing anger and disappointment when turned away. Some took photos of my closed pool, presumably to report back to Corinne. Others left nasty notes in my mailbox or posted critical comments in the neighborhood social media group. I installed a no trespassing sign and kept my gate locked at all times. I began avoiding my backyard during the designated pool hours to avoid confrontation. My sanctuary had become a source of stress and anxiety rather than relaxation. Even floating in my pool after work now felt like a political statement rather than a moment of peace. With each passing day, the tension in the neighborhood grew. Neighbors chose sides, and the divide widened. I felt increasingly isolated in my own community, all because one woman had decided my property should serve her agenda. 3 weeks into this nightmare, I had to make an emergency grocery run after work. The summer heat had been relentless, and I had completely run out of bottled water and several other essentials. I was gone less than 45 minutes. As I turned onto my street, I noticed several unfamiliar cars parked in front of my house. My heart sank as I pulled into my driveway. The sound hit me first, splashing water, laughter, music playing from a portable speaker. I dropped my groceries in the kitchen and rushed to my back door. Through the glass, I saw what could only be described as a pool party in full swing. At least a dozen people, adults and children I did not recognize, were in my backyard. Some were swimming in my pool. Others lounged on my patio furniture. A cooler had been placed on my custom stone decking. And there, holding court at the edge of the pool, was Karen. She wore a wide-brimmed sun hat and oversized sunglasses, gesturing animatedly to two women sitting in my lounge chairs. My gate lock had been broken, the metal hasp bent and useless. For a moment, I stood frozen in disbelief. Then rage washed over me in a hot wave. I slid open the door with such force that it bounced against the stop. "What is going on here?" My voice came out louder than intended, causing several swimmers to freeze mid-stroke. Karen turned slowly, adjusting her sunglasses. "Ah, you are home. We are just enjoying the community pool hours as posted." "This is not a community pool." I scanned the yard, noting unfamiliar towels draped over my furniture, sunscreen bottles on my tables, and a stack of pool toys that were not mine. "You have broken into my property. You have damaged my gate. Everyone needs to leave immediately." A man I did not recognize stepped forward. "Look, we were told this pool was available for neighborhood use during scheduled hours. We are just following the rules." "There are no such rules," I said firmly. "You have been misled. This is my private residence and private pool. You are all trespassing right now." Karen stood up, clipboard materializing from beside her chair. "Actually, I have the community access agreement right here. As I tried to explain to you before, Section 7.3 clearly states—" "Show me," I interrupted her. "Show everyone here the document where I signed away rights to my own property." She clutched the clipboard tighter. "The HOA board approved it collectively. Your individual signature was not required." "That is not true, and you know it." I pulled out my phone. "I am calling the police to report trespassing and breaking and entering." Karen's face reddened. "You would not dare." "Watch me." I dialed 911 and reported the situation, emphasizing the broken lock and unauthorized entry. The operator promised to send officers immediately. The mention of police caused several families to hastily gather their belongings. Karen attempted to calm them, insisting they had every right to be there, but the exodus had begun. Within minutes, most of the trespassers had filed through my gate, avoiding eye contact as they passed. 2 police officers arrived 15 minutes later. By then, only Karen and one other couple remained, defiantly seated on my patio furniture. I explained the situation, showing the officers my property deed and the broken gate lock. Karen maintained her position that the HOA had authorized community use of the pool, but she still could not produce any legitimate documentation. "Ma'am," the older officer said to Karen after hearing both sides, "regardless of any HOA rules, this appears to be a private residence. Without clear documentation of an easement or shared use agreement, you cannot enter private property against the owner's wishes. But the community access provision, Karen began, would need to be recorded with the county and signed by the property owner, the officer interrupted. Do you have such documentation? Karen's silence was answer enough. This is a civil matter between homeowner and HOA, the officer explained to me. But we can document the forced entry and trespassing. You may want to follow up with civil action if this continues. After the police and Karen finally left, I surveyed the damage. Beyond the broken gate lock, I found sunscreen oil staining my custom cushions, a crack in one of my ceramic planters, and most concerning, the pool chemistry was completely off. Someone had added an excessive amount of chlorine, likely thinking they were being helpful. My pool equipment had been tampered with, settings changed on the pump and heater. That evening, I discovered a post from Karen on the neighborhood social media page describing me as mentally unstable and dangerous, claiming I had threatened families with children who were rightfully using the community pool. The post had dozens of supportive comments from neighbors who had only heard her side of the story. The violation notices continued to arrive, now escalating to $200 per day. My attempts to contact the property management company continued to be blocked. I could not even get contact information for the HOA attorney to begin legal proceedings. That night I sat beside my pool, the underwater lights illuminating the water with an ethereal blue glow. This was supposed to be my sanctuary, my reward for years of hard work. Instead, it had become the center of a neighborhood war. I felt violated, attacked, and completely alone. Something had to change. Conventional methods had failed. I needed a different approach, something that would expose Karen's lies once and for all. Sometimes the best ideas come when you least expect them. I was mindlessly scrolling through my phone that night, trying to distract myself from the neighborhood drama, when I stumbled across a video about a water park in Japan. They had created a special attraction using a non-toxic thickening agent that transformed water into a jelly-like substance that people could walk on briefly before sinking. It was completely safe for human contact and broke down naturally after a few days. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I researched the product. It was called Aqua Gel and was used in professional water shows, specialized water parks, and even scientific demonstrations. The gel was completely skin-safe, non-toxic, and most importantly, reversible with a neutralizing agent. It came in various colors, including a vibrant blue that was impossible to miss. The next morning, I called a local pool supply professional who specialized in unique water features. I explained my situation without mentioning my emerging plan. He confirmed that such products existed and were perfectly legal for private pool use. "It is your pool," he said. "As long as you are not creating an environmental hazard, you can modify your water however you want. People put all kinds of things in pools, specialized lighting, floating decorations, even temporary dyes for parties." Next, I contacted a property attorney through a legal referral service. During our consultation, I laid out the entire situation with Karen and the HOA. The attorney was appalled. "What you are describing is borderline criminal," she said. "No HOA has the authority to commandeer private property for community use. Your pool is covered under your property deed, and only you can grant access rights. So there is no way the HOA could have legally created a community access provision without my knowledge or consent," I asked. "Absolutely not. That would constitute fraud at minimum. I suggest documenting everything and preparing for potential litigation." The attorney recommended installing security cameras to document the trespassing and any property damage. That afternoon, I purchased a comprehensive security system with multiple cameras covering my backyard, gate, and pool area. I also ordered a heavy-duty lock for my gate that would be much more difficult to break. While setting up the security system, I noticed my neighbor Daniel watching from his yard. Daniel was one of the few neighbors who had remained friendly throughout the ordeal. He approached the fence line. Having some security issues, he asked sympathetically. I explained the situation briefly, and his expression darkened. Corinne tried something similar with my workshop last year. She claimed the neighborhood needed a community tool share program and expected me to allow strangers to use my expensive equipment. How did you resolve it? I asked. I threatened legal action and stood my ground. Eventually, she moved on to another target. He paused. Not everyone has the resources or will to fight back, though. She usually gets her way. Over the next few days, I quietly spoke with a few other neighbors who had similar stories. Corinne had a long history of overreach, but most people eventually gave in to avoid conflict. I gathered their contact information, building a network of potential allies. The final piece of my plan fell into place when I placed an order for several gallons of aquagel concentrate in vibrant blue, along with the necessary neutralizing agent. The package would arrive in 3 days. Coincidentally, the exact day Corinne had scheduled another unauthorized community pool day. I also ordered a waterproof sign that read "Private Property. No trespassing VIOLATORS will be PROSSUTD," to replace the smaller sign that had been repeatedly ignored. The new sign was impossible to miss, bright red with reflective lettering. The evening before Community Pool Day, I methodically prepared. I tested my security cameras, ensuring they had clear views of the pool and gate area. I charged my phone to record interactions. I printed multiple copies of my property deed and pool permit to have on hand. I rehearsed what I would say when confronted, keeping my responses clear and factual rather than emotional. I sent a final email to Corinne and copied every HOA board member I could identify. The message was simple. This is your final notice that my pool at 487 Sycamore Lane is private property. Any attempt to access it without my explicit permission constitutes trespassing and will be treated as such. All previous communications claiming community access rights to my pool are fraudulent. I slept surprisingly well that night, knowing that tomorrow would bring either resolution or escalation. Either way, the situation would not continue as it had been. As the sun rose on what would become a legendary day in our neighborhood, I prepared the final piece of my plan. I put on gloves and carefully measured the aquagel concentrate, following the instructions exactly. I would not add it until the last possible moment. By noon, everything was in place. Now all I had to do was wait for Corinne and her followers to arrive. Saturday arrived with perfect pool weather, sunny, hot, and not a cloud in the sky. According to Corinne's unauthorized schedule, community pool hours would begin at 1 o'clock. I started my preparations early, adding the aquagel concentrate to the pool at precisely 11:30. The transformation was fascinating to watch. The clear water gradually thickened, taking on a vibrant blue hue that was unlike any normal pool water. After an hour, the surface had a subtle jiggle when disturbed, like an enormous bowl of blue jello. I positioned myself at my kitchen window, which provided a clear view of the backyard and pool area. My phone was fully charged, and the security cameras were recording from multiple angles. I had also set up a small video camera on a tripod near the pool, ostensibly to record pool maintenance procedures if anyone asked. At 12:55, the first cars began arriving. From my vantage point, I could see Corinne walking up the street, leading a group of at least 15 people. She wore a sundress and carried her ever-present clipboard, along with a large beach bag. Behind her were several families with children in swim attire, carrying towels, pool toys, and coolers. The procession had the air of an authorized community event, which made my blood boil despite my determination to remain calm. As expected, they headed straight for my side gate. I watched through the window as Corinne confidently approached, noticed the new heavy-duty lock, and frowned. She looked at her watch, then at the group behind her. I could read the hesitation on her face. Corinne knocked loudly on my front door. I did not answer. She knocked again, more insistently. After a few minutes, I saw her direct the group to wait while she walked around to the back of the house, presumably looking for another way in. The security camera caught her testing my back door, which was locked. I watched her return to the waiting group, clearly flustered but maintaining her authoritative demeanor. Then, to my shock but not complete surprise, she produced a pair of bolt cutters from her large beach bag. The security camera captured her clear intent to cut my new lock. That was my cue. I opened my front door and walked calmly around the side of the house. "Can I help you?" I asked, as if discovering them for the first time. Corinne startled, quickly handing the bolt cutters to someone behind her. "We are here for the community pool hours, but your gate appears to be locked." "Yes, I lock my gate to my private property," I replied. "As I have repeatedly explained, there are no community pool hours because this is not a community pool." "The schedule clearly states," she began, but I interrupted her. "The schedule that you created without my knowledge or consent has no legal standing. You are attempting to break into private property right now, and I have everything on video." The group behind her shifted uncomfortably. Several parents began whispering to each other, clearly concerned about the situation they had been led into. "Perhaps this is just a misunderstanding," Corinne said, her voice taking on a conciliatory tone that I had never heard from her before. "Why do we not all discuss this calmly? The children have been looking forward to swimming all week." "I am happy to let them see the pool," I said. "In fact, I have been doing some special maintenance today that might interest everyone." Curiosity won out over caution. Corinne's expression showed triumph as I unlocked the gate and led the group into my backyard. That expression froze and then crumbled spectacularly when everyone got their first look at the pool. The vibrant blue gel undulated slightly in the light breeze. It clearly was not water in any normal sense. It looked more like a giant blue gelatin mold shaped like a pool. "What did you do?" Corinne gasped. "I modified my private pool using a perfectly legal, non-toxic gel additive," I explained loudly enough for everyone to hear. "As the sole owner of this pool, I have the right to use it as I see fit." The children, far from being disappointed, were fascinated. "Can we touch it?" one boy asked. "Of course," I said. "It is completely safe to touch. It is the same material used in specialized water parks." While the children excitedly poked at the gelatinous surface, the parents looked confused. One mother approached me. "I do not understand. Corinne told us this was a neighborhood pool that you were required to share." "That is completely false," I stated firmly. "I have all the documentation proving this is my private property." Corinne fabricated the community access story. By now, Corinne's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "This is vandalism of a community asset," she sputtered. "The HOA will hold you financially responsible for restoring the pool to usable condition." "It is impossible to vandalize your own property," I replied calmly. And I have an email from the county inspector confirming that this modification is completely within my rights as the property owner. A father who had been listening intently stepped forward. Karen, have you been lying to us about this pool? Is there actually any documentation making this a community amenity? All eyes turned to Karen, who clutched her clipboard tighter. The HOA board approved the community access provision. It is in the minutes of the meeting. May we see those minutes? Another parent asked. Karen's composure finally shattered. This is ridiculous. The pool was perfectly fine last week when we used it. He has deliberately sabotaged it out of spite. Her admission of previous unauthorized use hung in the air. The group began murmuring, the mood shifting palpably. Last week when you broke my gate lock and trespassed on my property, I asked pointedly. That incident has been reported to the police, and I have video evidence of today's attempt to break in as well. One by one, the families began to leave, offering awkward apologies as they exited. Karen remained, her knuckles white around her clipboard, watching her carefully constructed narrative collapse completely. The Blue Pool incident, as it came to be known in Sycamore Hills, spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. By Sunday morning, my phone was buzzing with text messages from neighbors I had barely spoken to before, all asking for the real story. The neighborhood social media group was ablaze with discussions, with several people calling for an emergency HOA meeting to address potential misrepresentations by the board. Karen attempted damage control by posting a lengthy explanation claiming that she had been acting in the best interest of the community, and that I had misunderstood the nature of the pool access program. Few seemed convinced, especially after Daniel and several other neighbors shared their own stories of Karen's overreach. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for Wednesday evening at the community center. The room was packed beyond capacity, with people standing along the walls and spilling out into the hallway. I arrived early with a folder containing all my documentation and a USB drive with selected video footage. The meeting was called to order by the HOA vice president, a retired schoolteacher named Margaret who had always seemed reasonable in previous interactions. Karen sat rigidly at the board table, her expression a mixture of defiance and apprehension. Margaret addressed the room. We have called this special meeting to address concerns regarding the situation with the private pool at 487 Sycamore Lane. We will hear from both the homeowner and the HOA president, then open the floor for community discussion. I presented my case first, methodically laying out the timeline of events. I displayed my property deed, pool permit, and insurance documentation on the projector screen. I played selected video clips showing the broken gate lock, Karen's unauthorized pool party, and her attempt to cut the new lock with bolt cutters. I shared email exchanges demonstrating my repeated attempts to resolve the situation through proper channels. At no point did I ever agree to, sign, or even discuss any community access to my private pool, I concluded. The claim that such an agreement existed was fabricated. The room was silent as Karen took her turn at the podium. Her usual confidence had evaporated, replaced by a defensive posture. The board discussed the possibility of neighborhood pool access as a community improvement initiative, she began. Perhaps I was overzealous in implementing what was merely a proposal. My intention was to provide a valuable amenity for our families during the hot summer months. Was this proposal ever voted on by the full board? Margaret asked. Karen shuffled her papers. We discussed it informally. So there was never an official vote or approved community access provision, Margaret pressed. Not formally, no, Karen admitted reluctantly. The room erupted in murmurs and exclamations. One board member, a lawyer named Robert, looked particularly disturbed. As a board member, I was never informed about any of this, he stated. This appears to be a serious breach of HOA protocols at minimum, and potentially fraudulent misrepresentation of HOA authority. When the floor opened for community comments, the dam broke. Neighbor after neighbor came forward with stories of Karen's unauthorized actions, rules enforced selectively, and intimidation tactics. Many expressed shock at the pool situation, having genuinely believed Karen's claims about community access. By the end of the 2-hour meeting, the board voted unanimously, with Karen abstaining, to request her resignation as HOA president, initiate an audit of all HOA communications and enforcement actions for the past year, and issue a formal apology to me for the pool incident. Karen resigned 3 days later, sending a terse email citing personal reasons for her departure. The interim board, now led by Margaret, immediately rescinded all violation notices and fines that had been issued regarding my pool. The legal consequences continued to unfold in the following weeks. My property attorney filed a civil complaint for trespassing, property damage, and defamation. Rather than face a public legal battle, Karen agreed to a settlement that included paying for all damages to my gate, pool equipment, and patio furniture, plus a significant sum for emotional distress and defamation. The settlement included a non-disclosure agreement, but word got out anyway, as it always does in close-knit communities. As for my pool, I added the neutralizing agent the day after the confrontation, returning it to its normal state. The pool's supply professional inspected everything and made some minor repairs to the equipment that had been tampered with. By the following weekend, my backyard sanctuary was restored to its former glory. The most surprising outcome was the change in neighborhood dynamics. The following month, the new HOA board approved a proposal to explore the development of an actual community pool in the unused green space at the edge of the subdivision. A committee was formed, proper surveys conducted, and transparent communications maintained throughout the process. My relationship with my neighbors improved dramatically. The families who had been misled by Karen stopped by individually to apologize. Several became good friends. I eventually did host a proper neighborhood pool party, by invitation only, to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of my pool's completion. Karen put her house on the market 3 months after the incident. I heard through the grapevine that she had joined the board of another HOA in a neighboring town. I almost felt sorry for them. On quiet evenings, I still float in my pool watching the sunset, but now with a profound appreciation for the peace that comes not just from the water, but from standing up for what is right. Sometimes justice comes in unexpected forms, like a pool full of blue gel that exposed a neighborhood tyrant and restored a community's sense of fairness and respect. The incident became something of a local legend, retold at neighborhood gatherings with increasing embellishment. The story of the blue jello pool that brought down a HOA dictator. But for me, it was simply about protecting what was mine and refusing to be bullied, even when it seemed the entire neighborhood had turned against me. Some battles are worth fighting, especially when they take place in your own backyard.